The last breath of daylight bled across the Australian desert, staining the sand a deep molten crimson. Heat still shimmered above the earth, rising in wavering sheets like spirits escaping the ground. In the heart of this vast openness lay the encampment of the Red Sand tribe, a scatter of low, clay-walled shelters ringed by cooking fires whose smoke curled upward like slow-moving prayers. Evening in the desert arrived not with gentle dusk, but with sudden transformation. One moment the sun ruled in blazing gold. The next it surrendered to indigo. Shadows lengthened, stretching like dark rivers over the dunes, and a cooler wind began to flow from the south. The Red Sand people moved with a quiet rhythm that belonged to them alone, preparing for the night's rituals as their ancestors had for countless generations. Nauru crouched beside his mother's fire, a boy on the edge of manhood. He held a stone spearhead in his palm, its edge glinting with the final rays of sun. Each careful stroke of the polishing bone felt deliberate, almost ceremonial. Sparks of anticipation ran through his fingers and up his arms. Tonight, he would leave the safety of camp to begin the dream walk, the sacred trial that would determine if he was ready to stand as a hunter and protector of his people. He had imagined this night since childhood. The dream walk was more than a test of survival. It was a conversation with the living land, a meeting with the unseen powers that shaped every grain of sand and every gust of wind. Elders said that one who listened well could hear the voices of the ancient spirits beneath the dunes, could feel the heartbeat of the earth itself. Across the fire, his mother Yara stirred a clay pot of stew. The fragrant steam of wild herbs drifted between them. "You sharpen your spear as if you plan to fight the stars," she said softly, her eyes warm but steady. Nauru smiled without looking up. "The stars may test me harder than any beast." "They will," Yara replied, placing a hand on his shoulder. "But remember, the spirits test not your strength. They weigh your heart. Walk with respect, my son. Walk with patience." Her words settled into him like cool water. He knew them by heart. Every boy did, but hearing them from her lips gave them new weight. Tonight, those words would follow him into the desert's silence. The camp bustled with quiet preparations. Children gathered dry twigs. Elders marked a circle of ochre around the central fire. The scent of eucalyptus and burning sage carried on the wind. Dancers painted their bodies with crimson and white clay, symbols of sky and earth spiraling down their arms. Drums waited at the edge of the firelight, their taut skins ready to speak once darkness fully claimed the land. From the far side of the encampment, Jiru approached. Nauru's father moved like a man carved from the same stone as the surrounding cliffs, broad-shouldered, deliberate, with eyes that seemed to remember centuries. He carried no weapon tonight, only a staff decorated with carved emblems of past hunts. "You work the spear well," Jiru said, crouching beside his son. "But steel in the hand means little if the heart falters." "I will not falter," Nauru answered. "No." He felt a quick flutter in his chest. Jiru studied him, then nodded. "The desert remembers. Every footprint, every breath. Walk as if the sand itself watches, because it does. And when the voices come, whether in dream or waking, do not turn away." He touched Nauru's forehead lightly, leaving a trace of red dust. It was not merely blessing. It was a transfer of trust, an unspoken promise that the boy was ready. Nauru felt the weight of generations settle onto his shoulders, not as a burden, but as a mantle. The sun slipped below the horizon. A hush spread across the camp as the first star appeared, sharp and bright against the deepening blue. The elders began to chant, a low vibration that seemed to rise from the earth itself. Drums joined in, their steady rhythm echoing the heartbeat of the desert. Flames leaped higher, casting long, flickering shadows across the painted dancers. Nauru stood. The polished spear felt cool in his grasp, balanced and alive. Around his neck hung a small pouch of ochre dust and dried leaves, gifts from his mother for protection. He stepped toward the circle of elders. The ground beneath him warm with the memory of the day's sun. An elder named Kuri lifted a carved staff. His voice, worn yet powerful, carried over the chanting. Tonight, Naru, son of Yara and Jiru, walks the dream walk. He will leave the shelter of family and fire to meet the spirits of sand and starlight. If his heart proves steady, he will return as hunter and guardian. May the ancestors guide him. The tribe answered with a unified hum, resonance that filled Naru's chest like an extra heartbeat. He bowed his head, feeling the vibration pass through him. Jiru stepped forward once more. Go with respect. Go with courage. Without further word, Naru turned toward the open desert. Behind him, the fire roared and drums pounded, but ahead stretched a vast silence that swallowed all sound. The sky had deepened to velvet black, scattered with 1,000 gleaming stars. A crescent moon hovered low, silvering the edges of the dunes. The first steps away from camp felt heavy, as if each grain of sand tried to hold him back. Yet with every stride, the pull of the earth eased, and a strange calm settled over him. The rhythm of drums faded until only the soft crunch of his feet remained. He walked for what felt like hours, guided by the pale arc of the moon. The air cooled, carrying scents of distant rain and dry stone. Occasionally, a faint rustle broke the stillness, a lizard darting between rocks, a night bird calling from a hidden perch. Each sound felt amplified, as though the desert itself was breathing beside him. When he paused atop a tall dune, he looked back. The campfire was now a tiny ember on the horizon, a single star fallen to earth. Ahead, the dunes rolled endlessly, their shapes shifting under the moonlight, like slow waves at sea. He felt both infinitesimal and infinite, a single heartbeat within a living, endless body. The elders had spoken of this moment, when the land begins to speak. At first he heard only the wind, but as he listened deeper, patterns emerged, a low hum rising from beneath the sand, a subtle vibration in the air. It was not music exactly, yet it carried rhythm and intent. He tightened his grip on the spear and moved forward, descending into a shallow valley where the sand seemed to glow faintly. The hum grew stronger, mingling with the whisper of the wind. His heartbeat matched it, a shared pulse with the earth. Then he saw movement at the far side of the valley. The sand stirred, though no wind blew. Grains rose in swirling spirals, gathering into a shape taller than any man. A figure formed, a towering silhouette woven of dust and starlight. Eyes like twin constellations burned within the shifting mass. Naru stopped, breath caught in his throat. The air around him thickened, electric with unseen power. The figure spoke, its voice a deep resonance that trembled through the dunes. I am the memory of Earth, it said, words echoing like distant thunder. Do you walk for yourself, or for all who came before you? The question hung in the night, vast and heavy. Naru felt the weight of his ancestors pressing close. The hunters, the gatherers, the singers of old songs. He drew a slow breath, letting their presence fill him. For them, he answered, his voice steady despite the quake in his chest. And for the red sand yet unborn? Silence followed. Then the figure inclined its shimmering head. The swirling grains loosened, the starlit eyes softened. Then walk, it rumbled. And remember, the sandstorm shape dissolved, scattering into a warm breeze that brushed Naru's face. The hum faded back into the quiet of night, leaving only the whisper of the desert wind. Naru stood alone beneath the infinite sky, heart calm, purpose clear. He turned toward the next dune, knowing the dream walk had only begun, but that the spirits had accepted his first step. Behind him, the distant ember of the campfire glowed faintly, a reminder of home. Ahead, the desert stretched limitless, alive with unseen watchers. Naru tightened his grip on the spear and moved forward into the waiting night. The desert night held a silence so complete that every grain of sand seemed to listen. Naru paused atop a ridge, the moonlight silvering his shoulders, and let the hush press against him. Far behind, the campfire of the Red Sand tribe had dwindled to a faint spark on the horizon, a lonely reminder of warmth and kinship. Ahead, the dunes curved like the backs of sleeping giants. He felt both insignificant and chosen one, youth carrying the breath of countless ancestors. He tightened his grip on the spear. Each footstep sank softly, the sand accepting him without question. Yet within that quiet acceptance pulsed an alertness, as though the land itself waited to see what he would do next. Echoes of the past sudden rush of cool wind swept across the valley, bringing with it the faint scent of eucalyptus and smoke. Naru stilled. The smell belonged to the camp, yet it came from in front of him, carried against the natural flow of the night breeze. The hair along his arms rose. From the next dune, a shadow moved, broad-shouldered, deliberate. Moonlight caught a familiar profile. His heart leaped. Father. Jiru emerged from the silver mist of moonlight, walking as if he had simply stepped out of the earth itself. He wore no ceremonial paint, only the plain leather of a hunter. But his presence carried the weight of the elders' council and the ancient rock faces. Naru knew his father had not followed him. The dream walk forbade it. Yet here Jiru stood, eyes dark and steady. You have walked far, Jiru said, voice low, carried on the wind like the sound of distant drums. But distance means nothing if the heart forgets. Naru swallowed. Is this real? Or a vision? The desert decides what is real, Jiru answered. He drew closer until his face was clear-lined and weathered, yet ageless. I come because the spirits allow it. There is more for you to hear. Lessons beneath the stars. They stood together atop the dune, father and son silhouetted against the glittering sky. Above them, the Southern Cross burned bright, an eternal signpost. You met the memory of Earth, Jiru said, not as a question, but as fact. Naru nodded. It asked for whom I walk. And what did you answer? For them the ancestors end, for the red sand yet unborn. A faint smile touched Jiru's lips. Then you have spoken the truth of our people. But the dream walk is not only to meet spirits, it is to face yourself. The hardest trial is not hunger, not thirst, not even fear of death. It is to stand before your own shadow and not turn away. He raised his staff and traced a line in the air. The desert holds all stories. Some of them are yours, though you have not yet lived them. You must decide which stories you will carry and which you will release. Naru felt the words settle deep, like stones sinking into a riverbed. How do I know the right choice? Listen, Jiru said simply. The earth speaks in many tongues: wind, sand, silence. Your heartbeat is one of them. Trust it. A father's memory. Jiru lowered the staff, and for a moment the sternness in his eyes softened. When I walked the dream, I feared I would never return. The night was black as cave stone, and I heard voices that were not kind. They offered power, swiftness, the strength of the desert hawk if only I left behind the love of my people. He looked out across the endless dunes. I almost agreed. Power is a sweet lie. But then I heard your grandmother's song, just a fragment carried on the wind. That small memory saved me. I chose to return, not as a hawk, but as a man bound to his tribe. The story struck Naru with unexpected force. He saw his father not only as the unyielding hunter, but as a young man who once trembled before the same choice. The realization steadied him. Courage was not the absence of fear. It was the decision to stay true despite it. A test of the heart. The wind shifted again, rising to a low howl. Jiru's outline flickered, as if the moonlight itself wavered. I cannot walk beside you further, he said. Beyond this ridge, the spirits of thirst and mirage will try to turn you. They will show you water that is not water, paths that lead nowhere. Remember who you are. Remember the heartbeat of our land. Naru stepped forward, instinctively reaching out, but his father's form already shimmered like heat above a stone. Will I see you when I return? You will see me in every dawn, Jiru replied, voice now a deep echo. And when you stand as a hunter, I will stand beside you in the eyes of the tribe. The wind surged, swirling sand between them. Naru closed his eyes against the sting. When he opened them, the ridge was empty. Only the moon and the endless dunes remained. Alone, yet not alone, the sudden absence cut deep, but Naru felt no despair. Instead, an unfamiliar strength filled his chest. the steady rhythm that matched the desert's hidden pulse. He realized his father's visit, vision or not, had left more than comfort. It had left certainty. He descended the dune into a broad plain where the sand flattened and the air carried a metallic temps. The night grew colder, the stars sharper. Far ahead, a faint shimmer flickered on the horizon, like water under sunlight. Mirage. He remembered Jiru's warning and kept his gaze level. Refusing the false promise, hours passed, though time felt strange, elastic. Hunger pinched his stomach. Thirst burned his throat. Yet with every step, the heartbeat of the earth guided him. Sometimes it came as a faint hum under his feet, other times as a subtle echo in his chest. A shadow of doubt crept in only once, when the cold deepened and the wind died completely. For a breath, the world held no sound. Naru wondered if he had strayed too far. The spirits had abandoned him. Then the sand beneath his feet trembled a single, soft pulse, like a drumbeat far underground. He closed his eyes and listened. The sound repeated, slow and sure. Not his imagination, not emptiness. The desert was speaking. He walked toward the rhythm, and with each step, the sense of connection grew stronger. He was no longer merely a boy in a vast wilderness. He was part of the wilderness, a single thread in the fabric of the living earth. Dawn's approach, faint glow touched the eastern horizon. The first suggestion of dawn. The sky shifted from black to deep cobalt, then to a fragile violet. Naru crested a final ridge and saw the desert bathed in the softest light. The endless dunes rolled away, their curves alive with morning color. He sank to one knee, spear planted upright beside him. For the first time since leaving camp, he allowed himself a long, full breath. The night had tested him with silence, with illusion, with the lonely echo of his own fears. And he had endured. Somewhere within that silence lingered his father's voice. Remember who you are. Naru pressed his palm to the sand. The earth beneath felt warm despite the night's chill, as if it recognized him. Perhaps it did. When the sun finally broke the horizon, gold spilled across the dunes. Naru stood, the light catching the ochre dust, still smeared on his forehead, a mark of blessing and belonging. The dream walk was not finished, but he had crossed its first great distance. The space between doubt and understanding, he lifted the spear and faced the rising sun. Behind him lay the memory of his father's words. Ahead stretched the unending desert and the trials still to come, yet he no longer feared them. The red sand people, the ancestors, the living earth moved with him. Naru stepped forward, the dawn painting his path in fire and gold. The desert at dawn glowed like a copper sea. Naru walked into the rising light, his shadow stretching long and thin across the sand. Each step left a print so precise it seemed carved rather than pressed, yet a gentle wind erased it almost at once. It reminded him of Jiru's words, "The desert remembers." Perhaps it remembered not by keeping marks, right, by knowing how to let them go. A faint ache settled into his legs, but the rhythm of his movement steadied his thoughts. Hunger had dulled to a background hum. Thirst pulsed sharper, a dry burn at the back of his throat. The dream walk offered no mercy. He had known this, but knowledge and experience were not the same. Still, he moved forward, the sun climbing higher with quiet inevitability. The shimmering promise by mid-morning, the horizon began to tremble. At first, Naru thought it was only heat rising from the dunes. But the shimmer thickened into something more. A long silver ribbon winding between the sandhills. Water, his heart leaped before his mind could speak. He quickened his pace, the spear tapping softly against his shoulder. The closer he walked, the clearer it became, an oasis nestled in the valley below, ringed with green reeds. Sunlight glittered on a small lake. Every instinct screamed, "Drink." His lips cracked as if in agreement. Yet a warning echoed within him. "They will show you water that is not water." Jiru's voice from the night before returned with startling clarity. Naru stopped at the crest of the dune, forcing himself to breathe. He closed his eyes. The smell of wet earth should have carried on the breeze, but only the dry scent of dust reached him. He opened his eyes again. The lake wavered, edges blurring like smoke. A mirage. He exhaled slowly. "You will not fool me," he whispered to the empty air. The heat haze shimmered once more, then collapsed back into bare sand and stone. Fire on the wind relief barely touched him before a new presence announced itself up.
A sudden shift in the air, hot and sharp.
The wind, which had been steady and cool, turned blistering. It whipped the dunes into spirals, stinging his skin. A low roar built behind the gust, and Naru smelled smoke. Ahead, flames erupted from the sand, leaping skyward in twisting columns. Fire raced toward him, as if the desert itself had ignited. He froze, every muscle screaming to run, yet some deeper sense told him the fire was no ordinary blaze. The flames moved without burning the ground. Their light pulsed in rhythm with his own heartbeat. A voice surged from within the inferno, neither male nor female, deep as the earth's core. "Turn back," it thundered. "The path ahead will take all you are. Return to the comfort of tribe and fire. Live." The temptation struck harder than thirst. To leave the dreamwalk now meant safety, warmth, his mother's voice, his father's steady hand. No more silence, no more endless dunes. But beneath the roar, Naru heard something else. The faint, steady hum that had guided him since the night began. The desert's heartbeat. He planted the spear in the sand and shouted over the wind, "I walk for those who came before. I will not turn back." The fire flared bright, then began to swirl, shrinking into a single column that rose like a torch. Sparks spiraled upward, merging with the blinding sun. When Naru blinked, the flames were gone. Only a faint warmth remained on his skin. The stone of question's exhaustion settled heavy on him after the trial of fire. He moved carefully, the sand searing under his feet until he reached a small plateau of black rock jutting from the dunes. Its surface was cool despite the heat, a welcome contrast. He knelt to rest, pressing his palms against the stone. A sudden vibration rippled beneath his hands. Startled, he pulled back. The rock trembled again, softly at first, then with deliberate rhythm. Lines of pale light etched themselves across its surface, forming ancient symbols, spirals, animal tracks, waves of flowing sand. From the glowing patterns a voice emerged, calm, resonant, carrying the weight of ages. "Naru of the red sand, you have resisted thirst and flame. Yet the greatest test lies within. Answer and walk free." The symbols shifted, arranging into a single question. What is strength? He considered. Images flashed through his mind, the polished spear, the fierce dances of the hunters, the searing trials of the night. But behind those came quieter memories, his mother's gentle songs, his father's soft counsel. The hum of the desert that asked only for listening. "Strength," he said aloud, "is to stay true when fear or desire would turn me. It is to protect the tribe, not to conquer." The stone pulsed with warm light. The voice returned, softer now. "Then you understand. Walk on." The glow faded, leaving only the black rock and the endless sun. Companions of silences, midday, burned above. Naru pressed on. Heat waves danced along the horizon, but no mirages appeared. Instead, a faint shadow glided across the sand beside him. He looked up. A hawk circled overhead, its wings cutting the sky in perfect arcs. It gave a single sharp cry, a note that pierced the still air. Something in the sound felt like recognition. The hawk swooped low, passed directly over him, and veered east. Naru followed its path with his eyes. Beyond a ridge of pale dunes lay a darker line, almost hidden, the outline of a canyon. Shade, shelter. He set his course toward it. The hawk continued to circle, leading him onward. Whether spirit or flesh, he could not tell. But its presence steadied him. The canyon of echoes, the descent into the canyon brought instant relief. Cool shadows stretched like welcoming arms. The air smelled faintly of moss and stone life hidden beneath the desert's harsh. Skin, water trickled somewhere in the depths, a soft, real sound that filled him with sudden gratitude. He followed it to a narrow pool fed by a tiny spring. Dropping to his knees, he cupped the water in his hands, cold, sweet, indisputably real. He drank until his thirst eased and splashed the remainder across his face. The hawk landed on a ledge above, silent, watching. Naru leaned back against the canyon wall, closing his eyes. The trials of the day replayed the false oasis, the firestorm, the questioning stone. Each challenge had demanded more than endurance. Each had required a choice. He thought of his father's warning: stand before your own shadow and not turn away. Perhaps he had done just that. Perhaps the mirages, the fire, even the speaking stone were shapes of his own fear and desire, given form by the spirits. A deep calm settled over him. The desert was no longer an adversary, but a vast companion, live and aware. Toward the next horizon, when he finally rose, the sun had begun its slow decline, softening from white to amber. The hawk gave another cry and launched into the open sky. Naru watched it wheel once, with an angle westward, the direction of home. He tightened the pouch around his neck, feeling the protective dust and leaves inside. The dream walk was not finished, but something fundamental had shifted. He had faced illusion, fire, and the deepest question of his heart. He carried the answers now, not as words, but as a quiet strength. The canyon opened onto a broad expanse of dunes, glowing gold in the lowering sun. Somewhere beyond, the tribe awaited, not as a destination, but as the next circle of the journey. Naru stepped into the light. The hawk's shadow flickered across the sand ahead of him, a silent guide toward the horizon, where day met night. The desert had changed. Not in its colors, those endless hues of rust, gold, and ochre still rippled beneath the morning sun, but in the way it greeted Naru, where once he had felt its vastness press upon him like a silent test. Now, it seemed to breathe in rhythm with his own chest. Every grain of sand carried a quiet recognition, as if whispering, "You have returned. You belong." A new dawn days passed after the great welcome, yet the celebration lingered in every heartbeat of the camp. Children still reenacted his journey in their play, darting between the huts with painted faces, pretending to battle spirits of wind and fire. The elders watched with knowing smiles, their voices humming the songs of his dream walk, as if it were an old, familiar legend. But Naru felt the difference keenly. Before, he had been a youth of questions. Now, even as those questions deepened, they no longer frightened him. The heartstone lay against his chest, warm and constant. And with it came a quiet clarity. His life's path had widened. One evening, as the western sky blazed with the same crimson that named their tribe, Jiru approached his son. "The people look to you now," he said, eyes steady as the horizon. "But leadership is not a crown to be worn. It is a burden to carry lightly, with patience." Naru nodded. "Miran told me the same," he replied, and his father's brow lifted at the name. The ancestors spoke of service, not rule. A silence of understanding passed between them, as if the desert itself acknowledged their shared vow. Lessons of the hunt the following morning. The council sent Naru, with a group of seasoned hunters, to track a herd of sand antelope that had wandered near the distant salt flats. The hunt was both necessity and tradition, a test of skill, but also a gift to the tribe. They moved before dawn, their bodies blending with the land. Naru felt each movement as a conversation with the earth. The subtle shift of wind, the faint indent of hoofprints, the distant echo of hooves across stone. Midway through the chase, a sudden gust erased their trail in a storm of swirling dust. The hunters hesitated, scanning the shifting dunes. But Naru closed his eyes and listened beyond sight, beyond sound, to the steady hum he had learned on the dream walk. "There," he said softly, pointing toward a narrow canyon veiled by shadow. The others followed without question. Minutes later, they found the herd drinking from a hidden spring, untouched by the storm. The lead hunter, a wiry elder named Karu, studied Naru with quiet respect. "You see as the earth sees," he murmured. "This is the mark of one who has walked with spirits." That night, when the hunters returned laden with food, The tribe greeted them with songs of gratitude. Yet it was not the kill that filled Naru with pride, it was the confirmation that the Dreamwalk's lessons had become part of him, guiding his every decision. The fire council, a week later. The elders gathered around the central fire for the seasonal council, a meeting where matters of trade, migration, and teaching were decided. Though still young, Naru was invited to sit within the circle, a place reserved for those whose voices carried the tribe's wisdom. The flames cast tall shadows across the ochre-painted stones as Elder Curry spoke. "The rains grow uncertain," she said, her voice like gravel shaped by water. "The western springs dry early. We must choose a new route when the great heat returns." All eyes turned to Jiru. Then to Naru. The young hunter felt the weight of their gaze, but did not flinch. He pictured the dunes as he had seen them from the Dreamwalk's highest peak. The patterns of wind and water etched across memory. "There's a canyon beyond the salt flats," he said carefully. "Hidden springs lie beneath the stone. The hawk led me there during my trial. The path is difficult, but the water is true." The council murmured, considering. Finally, Kuri nodded. "The spirits speak through those who listen. We will follow this path when the time comes." Naru exhaled, quiet satisfaction of service warming him more than the fire. Whispers of change, not all voices were of agreement. Later, as the council dispersed, a young warrior named Merrick approached, his expression sharp. "You speak with the authority of elders," he said. "But you are barely older than the children who chase lizards in the dust." Naru met his challenge calmly. "I speak only what I have seen." Merrick's eyes narrowed. "And if the springs are dry, if your spirits lied, then we will find another way," Naru replied. "But I will have tried, not stayed silent." Merrick said nothing more, but his clenched fists betrayed his unease. Naru understood. Change, even when guided by vision, often stirs the restless heart. Keeper of memory, as moon after moon passed. The Red Sand tribe prepared for their great migration. Under Naru's quiet guidance, they mapped the desert with care, marking safe passages and secret wells. He spent long nights teaching the children the star patterns he had seen dance above Marin's head, ensuring that the sky itself would guide them if memory failed. Yara often joined him during these lessons. Her laughter wove through the warm night air like a melody of its own. One evening, as they traced the Hawk constellation across the dark, she said softly, "You walk between worlds, now between the living and the ancestors." "I only listen," Naru answered. "The desert speaks to all of us." "I was merely awake enough to hear." She smiled, the firelight catching in her eyes. "Perhaps that is what the spirits truly seek, or is willing to listen." The journey ahead at last. The day came when the tribe would move. Before dawn, Naru stood on a ridge overlooking the vast sweep of their homeland. The Heartstone rested against his chest, warm as ever. Behind him, the people stirred, women packing bundles of dried herbs, hunters checking spears, children whispering with excitement. Jiru joined him, silent for a time as the first light brushed the horizon. "You have grown beyond my teaching," the father said at last. "But remember, the Dreamwalk is not a single path. It is a way of living." Naru turned to him, the desert wind lifting the edges of his cloak. "I will remember," he said. Together they watched the sun rise, casting the land in molten gold. Below, the tribe began its slow procession toward the canyon of hidden springs, toward survival, toward renewal. Keeper of the red sandas, they moved. Naru walked at the forefront, not as a ruler, but as a guide. Every step in harmony with the earth's deep heartbeat. The hawk circled above, silent sentinel against the endless sky. He understood now that his dream walk would never truly end. Each decision, each teaching, each quiet moment of listening was another step in the journey. He was no longer merely a hunter. He was a keeper of memory, a bridge between what was and what would be. The desert, vast and eternal, welcomed him as both son and steward. And as the Red Sand tribe followed the path of his vision, the hum of the earth rose, once more a song of belonging, of resilience, of life unbroken across the sands of time,